Good morning, Nebraska. My name is John Turner. I work at the Nebraska Investment Finance Authority, and you are watching Conference Connections. NIFA has a conference every year, and this year, due to the pandemic, we were unable to hold that conference, so we decided to bring it to you via webinar. And today we have a fantastic lineup of speakers. This was a session that we did have scheduled at our conference on tiny homes. I think you're going to learn a lot, and we're very excited that you could be here. One of the things that anyone who's been to our conferences before, you know, we have exhibitors and sponsors, and we wanted to highlight a couple of those today. Our exhibitors are CDS Inspections and Beyond and Excel Development Group, and our sponsors are Bonneville Multifamily Capital and Sugar Creek Capital. And I just wanted to also mention that there's two other NIFA staff that are going to be helping in the background, Robin Ambrose and Elizabeth Finbris. So thanks to them for helping, because we're going to monitor your questions as they come in. We do have a feature on this webinar where you can type your questions in, and we will be checking those throughout. We're going to save the questions till the end. And if you would prefer to actually ask the question verbally, you can raise your hand and we will unmute you at the end of the presentations. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to the moderator today, and that's Rhonda Mattingly from Bridges to Hope. Take it away, Rhonda.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm really excited to be a part of this. Back in 2016, NIFA had a conference, and Dan spoke of tiny village homes, and I was just dreaming about the time where they would end up here in Nebraska, where we could bring them to Nebraska, and it looks like these dreams are going to come true. We've already got some that are in the works. So our first speaker is the executive director and co-founder of Square One Villages in Eugene, Oregon, Dan Bryant. Square One Villages' mission is to create self-managed communities of tiny homes for people in need of housing. Pioneered in 2012, Square One Village has a transitional shelter and 2 permanent housing projects, plus more in development. Dan is also a minister at First Christian Church Disciples of Christ in Eugene, Oregon. Dan, welcome.
Thank you, Rhonda. It is a delight to be in Nebraska once again. Just sorry I couldn't be there in person. Sorry that we have to do presentations in this way in this time, but very thankful that we have this technology that we can still connect in this way. And it is exciting to share with you the story of Square One. And what I would like to do, because I know not everyone was at that presentation 4 years ago, and even if you were, you might not have remembered everything, just like the people in my congregation don't remember a sermon from week to week. But at any rate, I want to give you a brief history of our work and how we got to where we are, give an update of the things we've done since 2016. And then I'm going to introduce our program manager, Jeff Albanese, who's going to walk you through the new model that we have developed that we're very excited about. So Square One is a grassroots organization that began from scratch with no funds, no staff. We were just a group of concerned people and activists and advocates who felt that we needed to figure out some new solutions to the housing crisis in our community. And I say intentionally housing crisis and not homeless crisis, because we believe in general the problem is not the unhoused, though there certainly are always exceptions. The problem is lack of affordable housing, shelter, and services. And Eugene has one of the highest rates of unsheltered people in the nation. Indeed, there was a recent study that revealed that we were #1 in the country with unsheltered people, with 3 out of every 4 in our community that were unhoused who had no shelter, literally no place to go. And that's nearly 2,000 people. And for me, the issue is not just an economic one. It goes much deeper to the soul of who we are as a community and a nation. Or how does one live with any sense of dignity, let alone with any quality of life, when you have no place to be, no place to keep your things, no place to get any rest, to recover when you are ill, or to attend to basic needs? So homelessness is not just their problem, it is our problem. And until we recognize and address the systemic issues that contribute to it, we are never going to solve this crisis. So we began organizing back in 2012, held a number of meetings with our unsheltered citizens, and we asked ourselves, what can an ordinary group of people do to address this issue? And the first thing that we decided was that we needed to create a new model of shelter, one that is less expensive to build and one that draws upon the gifts and the abilities of the people themselves who are unsheltered and would be living there. So after a year of organizing, we started Opportunity Village Eugene, a gated community of tiny homes. And I like to joke that, you know, the rich get to have gated communities. Why shouldn't the homeless? But it's really not tiny homes. They're sleeping cabins for about 35 people that would be largely self-managed with the assistance from volunteers in those first couple of years. And we lined up all of the community support, including our city council, received approval to operate a pilot project on city-owned property for 1 year to see if our concepts would work. Well, that was 7 years ago, still going strong, so I guess you can say that it works. And with a large crew of volunteers and some of the unsheltered themselves and just $11,000 in cash, we began building. And on this day, this picture was taken when we first started. We constructed our first 5 units, and people moved in that night. And those who didn't get a unit to start with slept in a tent until we built a unit for them. It took us about 9 months to complete the project, just under $100,000 in cash and about the same amount in-kind contributions. Now, we decided to focus on adults because we discovered that they are the most underserved people in our community. Most families find their way into shelter, but those without children basically are left on their own. And that also simplifies a number of other things because the size of what you build, things like legal issues, insurance, all kinds of things, it's just way more complicated when you have minors involved. So it made it much easier for us to organize this and for it to be self-managed. And in our 7 years of operation, we've served nearly 200 people, with 60% of those who've left the village moving into permanent housing of some kind. We did add a half-time staff position to help with some of the logistical issues in our 3rd year of operation. And our cost of operation to this day remains about $6 to $7 a night per person, with the villagers contributing $35 a month themselves, in addition to 10 hours of service that they do each week to take care of the facility and to staff the front gate. Villagers cook their own meals in a semi-outdoor cooking facility. They meet every week to discuss village business and to work out issues. And after a year of operating this, helping people get back up on their feet, we began asking ourselves, why is it so difficult to get them into housing? And when we surveyed the various affordable housing options in our community for the people we were serving, we were rather shocked to discover the dearth of housing for those without children. So on our local housing authorities website, they list the wait times. And for those families that needed a 3-bedroom apartment, the wait time was about a year. For those needing 2 or 4 bedrooms, the wait time was 2 to 3 years. But those without children who just need a studio or a single bedroom, the wait time was 6 years. And we knew we had people that simply could not wait that long. So we decided to build our own. Enter Emerald Village Eugene. And I just have to say, that as Rhonda mentioned, yeah, I am a preacher. Actually, I gave up my preaching position.
Hey, Dan.
So that
I have to interrupt you for a second. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to make sure that you are sharing your screen.
Is it not sharing? I've been going through all these slides and they weren't being shared.
No, sorry. You were doing such a great job, but yeah.
You didn't want to interrupt me. That's okay. So do you see it now?
Yep. Just need to see your PowerPoint. So right now we're seeing a flower.
Thank you for interrupting me. That's rather embarrassing that
I wasn't sure if maybe you were just giving us a quick update before you got into it, but I thought, oh man, I've seen your slides and they're so good. I want everyone else to see them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Now my only problem is I did something wrong on my screen because I can't see my slides. So let me see what happened here.
Let me try taking it back from you and give
No,
him.
no, okay, you see it? There we go. You see Emerald Village, Eugene?
Yep, now
Give
we
it
do.
a second. Yep, all right. Well, what you missed were slides of us talking and slides of us building Opportunity Village. That wasn't the critical part. The part that we want to focus on today is Emerald Village, because that's really the new exciting project that we have started on of that affordable housing. And what I was about to say before I was very kindly interrupted, thank you very much, was that I just love the fact that the name spells Eve. And so I like to consider this the mother of tiny home villages. We purchased an acre of land and recruited a group of architects to engage in some very friendly competition with the challenge to design, build, and to actually donate a home to us. And we ended up with 14 different designs from these architects. In many cases, they were built by construction firms, not the architects themselves. And then there were 8 that we designed and built with our own group of volunteers and carpenters. And we selected our first group of residents even before we began building so that they could participate in that process. And here they are at the groundbreaking ceremony with our mayor there in the center. For that. And by the way, she served for 16 years as mayor in our city and has been such a big supporter of us that she's now the chair of our board. We felt like we needed to give her something to do when she stepped down from mayor. And the residents not only put in a minimum of 50 hours of building their own homes, many did much more, like Cantrell here in the center, who logged in over 400 hours on his home. They became the owners of the co-op that leases the facility from us. And this is a very important principle to our work because we do not build rental housing. We build communities that I think is just wonderfully illustrated in the mural that was painted at Emerald Village. Communities that operate their own facility, and so that they can say legitimately that they at least own a portion of their own home. In this case, the share that they own is valued at $1,500 that they pay off over time, $50 a month. That's added to their lease that ranges from $200 to $300 a month, depending on the size of their home. So speaking of size, these homes are just 160 to 280 square feet. With one that's actually 2 stories of about 350 square feet, but they're not cheaply built. Our architects and builders took great pride in their work, and in most cases with custom built kitchenettes and bathrooms for an average cost of about $4,500 a piece from the foundation up. We bought the land, installed the foundations and all the infrastructure. Total cost of this project with the 22 tiny homes is $1.8 million. Including the nearly $500,000 of in-kind contribution from those builders. And the end product is a very attractive village that has become in many ways the crown jewel of that neighborhood. And they have shared in the pride of it. Before the pandemic hit, the village was offering tours every week to people in our community who just like to come to admire the work. Now, I say we still spent $1.8 million, but we had an appraisal that actually set the value at $2.9 million just a couple of weeks ago. So that tells you something of the value of this work. Now, the value to the residents, however, is priceless. Take Gibb here, a 75-year-old veteran living in a beat-up old RV when he became our first resident just 2 days before Christmas 2 years ago. He is the sweetest, kindest, gentlest man that you'll ever meet. And Sadie, his dog, is just like him. And then there's Alice, who made the mistake of thinking that at the age of 62, she could retire on her Social Security income, that would be enough to live on. But it wasn't, of course. She became homeless within a year. She spent over 2 years living at Opportunity Village before moving into her own home at Emerald Village. told us on that move-in day with tears in her eyes that she thought she would spend the rest of her life living in a shelter. And her eyes weren't the only ones that were watery on that day. Raymond, who probably is the cleanest, tidiest housekeeper I've ever known. I say that because every time I take a tour at the village, Raymond always invites us in to show off his home. He's so proud of it. And the really cool thing about this particular home is it is a clay straw construction technique. The wall's 12 inches thick, stuffed with a clay straw to make sure it's probably our best insulated home on the property. One of the key elements in a village of this type and tiny homes is the common house, much like a clubhouse in an RV park where you can hold meetings and family events because your tiny home isn't large enough, of course. And this common house includes a full, large, near commercial grade kitchen, a laundry facility. The village also has its own greenhouse, a tool shed, a large bike shed, and then you see the raised garden beds here. There are many of these scattered throughout the property as they're involved in growing much of their own food. And another key element is the landscaping, which is absolutely gorgeous. And I encourage anyone doing this kind of work, don't shortchange the landscaping. The work was done by a professional company with the assistance from the villagers. And just as at Opportunity Village, the residents at Emerald Village are responsible for the upkeep of the property and all the minor maintenance. They collect carrying charges from the villagers and pay most of their own operating expenses. The nonprofit receives a single ground lease payment from the co-op, which covers half-time administrator to assist with the village business, insurance, and other overhead. Now, here's what I think is absolutely astounding in this project. The residents are all below 30% of AMI, so they're very low income. The village is completely self-supporting from the rents that they pay. None of our villagers are on Section 8. So show me any other project in the country where that is happening. And this is possible because we funded the construction almost entirely with fundraising, except for $120,000 the city put into it to pay for our system development charges, a grant to buy the kitchen equipment in the common house, and one other small grant that we had. Plus we have a 20-year property tax exemption. So we wanted to see if we could replicate our success and do this in a rural community. So we are now building another project in Cottage Grove, just south of Eugene, with a grant from Meyer Memorial Trust. We purchased the property, and then with more fundraising, and then another grant from the county of $500,000. We are building 13 tiny homes, and with 9 of those that are due to be completed, and the first residents moving in here early in September. And since this is the town of Cottage Grove, we call it Cottage Village. And we're working on another project after that, a 2-acre site that we are seeking to purchase from Peace Presbyterian Church here in Eugene. So we are calling this Peace Village, and it will be a project of 36 tiny homes. So we're really excited about all this work. And now the next key part of this is what is called a limited equity co-op that we have branded as the village model. And I'm going to let Jeff Albanese, our program director, describe that to you. Jeff actually spent some time living in Opportunity Village when he was doing some research on these issues, and joined our staff a couple of years ago, and just brings a lot of knowledge and passion to this work. So Jeff?
Yeah, so I know this is a conference that's specifically about tiny homes, and some people think that what makes a project like Emerald Village so affordable is the fact that the units are on the smaller side, but really what is unique about the housing projects that we're doing has to do with our affordability strategy, combining elements of a limited equity housing cooperative and something like a community land trust. So what we're really focusing on is in our affordability strategy is changing the ownership structure into something that's a little less common, at least in this country. So I want to go over just some basic points about the reasoning behind combining a limited equity cooperative with a community land trust, and how it achieves permanent affordability, because that's really our strategy, is achieving housing, creating housing that will remain affordable in perpetuity. So this is a shared equity form of housing, basically in which a community land trust acquires land and develops housing on the land that it controls and retains ownership of the land in perpetuity and enters into a ground lease with a limited equity cooperative that owns and manages the buildings and improvements located on the land that the community land trust holds. So by separating out the ownership of the land and the ownership of the buildings and improvement, there exists a ground lease contract between the land trust and the co-op that provides mechanisms for enforcing permanent affordability and balances the interests of both the co-op and the land trust. The purpose, again, is to retain housing that's permanently affordable for households with low incomes. I don't know how common housing cooperatives are in Nebraska, but limited equity housing cooperatives is housing that's owned by a cooperative corporation in which the residents are all members of the corporation and have an equal say in how the buildings and improvements are managed. So, and the community land trust is there again to create that ground lease relationship, and that prevents the housing cooperative from deciding to change its bylaws and sell the property at a market rate. And this is something that happened in New York City in the 60s and 70s. New York City had a lot of public municipal support for helping residents of multifamily buildings convert into a limited equity cooperative, where the shares in the cooperative appreciated according to a formula rather than being sold on the open market. And what happened was that a lot of those properties that were received that municipal support, once the real estate market recovered in places like Manhattan, the residents, the members of those cooperatives decided to change their bylaws and convert into a market rate co-op and sell the property at whatever the market would bear. And so a lot of those buildings are now kind of indistinguishable from like luxury condos. And so when you combine a limited equity cooperative with a land trust, there's an additional party there that that can ensure that something like that doesn't happen and that the property remains affordable in perpetuity. So in conventional community land trust housing, it's basically single family housing, and the value, you know, an individual household will have to get a mortgage to acquire the housing, but there's a ground lease relationship, and that that ensures the affordability when the household sells the home. and the value that the homeowner realizes upon resale is determined by a formula. But a weakness of this conventional way of doing housing on community land trust land is the household still needs to qualify for conventional mortgage financing, and that can be a challenge for the households at the incomes that we're targeting. So it can still remain inaccessible to very low income households. And in a limited equity cooperative, that issue is addressed because it's the co-op rather than any individual household that that holds the mortgage debt. So that makes that can make financing a little bit easier for a co-op to acquire the buildings and improvements on land that is controlled by a community land trust. And so in a co-op, no individual household like owns their particular housing unit. So at Emerald Village, it's not like any individual owns the housing unit that they're living in. Everybody owns an equal share of all of the housing units that are controlled by the cooperative. And so there are additional responsibilities. You know, it's not like a conventional rental housing, because the members of the cooperative are responsible for the basic property management responsibilities, you know, filling vacancies, maintaining the property, making any necessary repairs, and maintaining the grounds. So combining a community land trust and a limited equity cooperative is another example of how shared equity ownership models can ensure permanent affordability, and any subsidies or public investments to create new affordable housing, those subsidies are preserved, and that's different from how the tax credit programs and the other public programs that exist to that currently exist to create new affordable housing units. It's different from that kind of subsidy in that there's not an ongoing need for injections of subsidies, and there's also no risk that, you know, at the end of an affordability period, a property can convert to market rate and monthly charges, you know, rise according to market conditions. So there are additional costs in developing co-op housing when compared to conventional multifamily developments, and that's in educating and training the members of the cooperative so that everybody understands how to conduct business as a cooperative. They understand the relationships between both the land trust and the co-op, and individuals understand the relationship between themselves and the cooperative of which they're a member. And this is really critical, you know, helping get folks to understand how to conduct a meeting, mediation skills, and budgeting. And with a cooperative, the members are setting their monthly charges each year and adopting an operating budget. And so it's not in anybody's interest to, you know, raise monthly costs any higher than what it actually costs to operate the project. And that's again is sort of one of the reasons for one of the ways that cooperative housing can be a way to develop affordable housing. The target populations for the projects that we do are between 30 to 80% of the area median income. Our Square One villages, which is serving as the land trust, our bylaws require us to maintain cost controls on any housing that sits on land that we own, so that it's affordable to 80% AMI households or below. And again, the purpose for combining a co-op and a land trust is so that there's no risk that the co-op convert to market rate in the future if market conditions entice the members to kind of cash out with their housing. So yeah, that's basically it on the ownership structure. There are other considerations with financing. Dan mentioned that Emerald Village was basically entirely donor financed. And we're currently working on some different financial models for being able to finance the development of additional co-ops at scale, rather than having to rely on fundraising for an entire project.
Okay, so we'll turn it back over to you, Rhonda.
Awesome, Dan and Jeff, thank you guys so much. I don't know about everybody else watching, but if this information and your progress doesn't convince city council members and board members that this is a good project to invest in, you know, I don't know what will. So thank you guys so much. And just remind everybody, we'll have questions for Dan and Jeff and all the presenters at the end. Next up, I'm excited to introduce a group of people who are currently in the development stages of their own tiny home village right here in Nebraska. Darin Smith is the president of Arch Icon Development. In 2010, Darin, along with Dustin and Mindy Crook, established Arch Icon Development and Construction to develop affordable and market rate housing along with commercial space. Having development and construction under one roof enables Arch Icon to control projects seamlessly from conception through completion. Arch Icon enjoys creating a sense of place through neighborhood and community revitalization with an eye to historic preservation. In addition to the development of its own properties, Arch Icon offers turnkey development and construction opportunities for other housing-related organizations. To date, Arch Icon has completed over $50 million in housing and community redevelopment in Iowa and Nebraska. In collaboration with Arch Icon, Linda Toomey will also be presenting. Linda is a licensed independent clinical social worker and is the executive director and CEO of the Siena Francis House located in downtown Omaha, Nebraska. The Siena Francis House is the state's largest provider of services to individuals experiencing homelessness, providing emergency shelter, residential addiction treatment, which includes transitional housing and permanent supportive housing. Before joining Siena Francis House, Linda worked for 15 years at the Department of Veterans Affairs as the program director of mental health specialty programs and as a therapist in the mental health department at the VA's Nebraska Western Iowa Healthcare System. While at the VA, Linda had a successful tenure leading the growth of the VA's homeless programs in Omaha. Linda was instrumental in coordinating partnerships in the development of 3 permanent supportive housing projects for veterans in Omaha, Lincoln, and Grand Island, creating 186 new units to serve veterans experiencing homelessness. Linda is now leading the Siena Francis House's efforts to create and provide effective services and community solutions to help end homelessness in the Omaha metro area. Linda earned a Master of Social Work from the University of Nebraska at Omaha and a Bachelor of Social Work and Sociology from Nebraska Wesleyan University. While not at work, Linda is busy with her husband, Jay, raising their 3 young adult children, Jackson, Jenna, and Jameson. Linda enjoys cooking, golfing, and family time. So with that, I will turn it over to you and your group, Darin.
Thank you, Rhonda. Let me try to share my screen. Linda, are you there? John, can you hear me?
Yes. Linda, go ahead and unmute yourself. Oh, here.
I'm muted by the organization.
Okay, now we can hear you. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's all right.
And can you turn your camera on?
I just tried.
Okay, very good.
And can you see the presentation?
Yes, there you go. Thank you.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, John and NIFA, for inviting us to present the St. Francis House Cottages. We'll just kind of jump right into it. Ours is a little bit different model than Pastor Dan's, but we'd like to thank Pastor Dan for all of his work and providing a template for us to follow. Great success stories, and I mean, even though this started summer of 2018, the idea came up to do something like this in Omaha. It's kind of been a slow roll because we're just kind of learning what Pastor Dan's doing and others have been doing. And we've visited Victory Village in Kansas City. And with all that Siena Francis House has going on, we've kind of timed our development to coincide with some other construction that they have going on. So we're at a point now where we've got site development going on, and a lot of getting the city work done. But the background is we had a mutual interest from some folks at the city of Omaha. We knew from what was going on with NIFA that there was some interest in tiny homes for housing the homeless veterans. So a few of us started the conversation. We then needed to partner with somebody, and St. Francis House was the logical partner in Omaha. That's where the largest homeless population is. And we found a site just north of their campus that would provide them with proximity to serve their existing clients without creating another site somewhere else in the city. So since then, and for over a year now, we've been working on site design, site plans, and just coordinating with the St. Francis House and their board on the timing to make this happen in a slightly different situation than what Pastor Dan is seeing in his projects. So St. Francis House is here. This is the location for the new site. So it's about a block away, and we're working with the city of Omaha to right now connect 16th and 17th streets that will provide more transparency for traffic of the homeless folks moving back and forth. So we're focused on, the plan is 50 cottages to serve St. Francis House existing clientele. Right now, Linda has some apartments that are already Section 42 and that may provide some transition for those folks as well. But our goal in this was to provide a gated community. As you can see from the location, it's industrial on the 16th Street side, and it's becoming more residential on the north and east side with St. Francis House and some other supportive services type businesses to the south. We wanted a lot of community gardens, lots of landscaping. Safety and security is of utmost importance for both the clientele, St. Francis House, and the residents around it. City zoning, there weren't any codes for tiny homes at the time. Now the new code does provide for tiny homes in Omaha, even though no other tiny home development has been done. So we've spent a lot of time working with the city and how are we going to make this fit into the current code requirements. It's going to be set up as a multifamily detached situation. So unlike Pastor Dan's and I guess the ownership structure that they're doing, this will be one large parcel with 50 essentially detached apartments from an ownership and zoning standpoint. That way, it simplifies things from an ownership standpoint. These are meant to be long-term, permanent supportive housing. a lot of attention's been given to the flow of the homeless traffic between the campus to where the tiny homes will be located. We're currently working with the city to secure 3 lots that they have around it, adjacent to it, to get all of the land assembled. Transportation will be provided with drop off to a community building that will serve the site. I mentioned the new street connecting 16th and 17th, and we're hoping that the city will go one step further and connect 17th and 18th Street as well. So this is our conceptual drawing. It ends up with, we end up with 3 types of tiny homes. One's 235 square feet, one's 263, and then type 3 are the handicap versions. We have community building with storage and social space, leasing office, administrative space, with lots of landscaping. So this is one of our first conceptuals, and will be on the city's planning board agenda in September to take the next steps forward with the site plan, site design approval, and those sorts of things. So that hopefully this is ready to go early next year or next summer from a construction standpoint. From a construction standpoint, we're looking at options for building, from the ground up on site. We're also looking at options for volunteer involvement in the construction if we did that model. We're also looking at partnering with, say, like Metro Community College and having students help build some of these. It's a matter of how we do it consistently, the cost for each model, transportation in, and making sure that the foundations are solid for providing tiny homes with a lot of longevity and years that will last moving forward. Each is about 270 square feet, 3 designs I mentioned, lots of landscaping. Sorry about that. All appliances provided, and wow, Dan, you got some really high-end looking tiny homes. Ours are just lines on paper right now. So we're looking forward to hopefully visiting and seeing some of what you've done. Again, mentioned longevity and efficiency, built on site or prefabricated. Those are the options that we're looking at. So here's one model. We hope to have, we want to have porches on each to provide each with their own sense of, and these, we intend for these to be single individuals, not for families, with everything there. They're studio in size, but they'll have their own bedroom with porches on the front, and then somewhere mostly inward facing. So we have nodes of 4 or 5 where you have your own little neighborhood of folks that you associate with, or with community gardens as well. That's one plan. And these don't look nearly as nice as Dan, so we apologize for that. But hopefully by the time they're all said and done, they'll be much more homey. But again, about 270 square feet. Here's another model that's a longer model, keeping the bathrooms and kitchen in the middle. And that's what that would lay out like. This is unit 3, similar, but this is the handicap accessible, slightly larger version. And that's what that would look like. So this is sort of a feel for how they'll lay out, how they'll face each other, and create, pockets of the neighborhood for all of the tenants. Another conceptual. And we can't wait till this is done so we can have some of the success stories and personal feel and touch to it that Dan's experienced in Emerald Village. Here's another conceptual of the site. Community space about 3,400 square feet with bathrooms, social space, community room, laundry for all of the tenants, storage, including winter bike storage and maintenance equipment storage. The hope is, and Linda will get into the more of the functionality, who will live there, the types of tenants we hope to gather, but the idea is that the tenants would take care of the space as much as possible. Storm shelter will be in the community building as well. Supportive services would be provided from there, but supported from Siena Francis House's current campus. This is an elevation of the community building. So the community benefits, without a doubt, meets Siena Francis House's mission. It adds to their continuum of service for the homeless population by providing the next step in independent living for their existing clientele. The idea is not to expand the capacity necessarily for Siena Francis House, but to provide more housing opportunities for those who are already there, where they can, those 50 tenants or clients who have the most likelihood of success in moving on to independent housing may flow through here. They may stay here for a long period of time, or they may flow into their own independent housing outside of this in the future. Creates it's a unique opportunity. We've had a lot of interest. It's just how to do it in Omaha and how to do it in Nebraska in a way. And I think this will probably be the first or one of the first Section 42 types of homeless housing in tiny homes that we've seen, and that is the plan. We have a crane application in NIFA for low-income housing tax credits. Siena Francis House has a lot of philanthropic support, and they've done a lot of, with that support, they've done a lot of improvements in construction over the last couple of years. So the idea here was using low-income housing tax credits to not further burden the philanthropic community in Omaha, but to use this as a model that would function well for low-income housing tax credits in conjunction with home funds or housing trust funds, but as well to create a model for a slightly less expensive form of housing than typical multifamily. These on the high side will probably cost per tiny home $35,000, but from a multifamily standpoint, it's much less than what you typically see over $100,000. Why it works that way, it's a lot of the other things that go into it, but we can keep these pretty simple, very energy efficient, and quickly built as well. So the economies of scale ends up working out well. Improves the neighborhood. Right now we've engaged with M-Space and Loverin locally to help us with public outreach in the coming month to share what we're planning with the neighborhood and regional stakeholders. Again, we'll be getting all of our approvals from the city council and planning board in the next 2-3 months, to the point that hopefully we'll have a project ready to go, a development ready for construction as early as next spring. Partners, Siena Francis House, our Tycon, Ali Pointer Maquetto has done all of the design, Nebraska Investment Finance Authority, City of Omaha, and Midwest Housing Equity Group right now is our equity investor. And that is it for my part of it. Let me see if I can figure out it. And this slide.
Okay, I just took the screen back from you, Darin. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm going to talk now about the services side and the Siena Francis House side of this project. Darin's right. We started these discussions in 2018, and we were thrilled when Archicon came to us with this idea for tiny homes. One core piece of this is the only thing that ends homelessness is housing. I think Dan talked a lot at the beginning of this presentation about what motivated them to start their first project for shelter, expand that to the Eve Village, the Goddess Village, and then now to look at a rural component of that. And that is, there is such a need for the affordable housing. So when ArchICon came to us, we were working on a $28 million renovation of our campus, which included a brand new shelter and renovating space for our drug and alcohol treatment program. So we were absolutely interested, but we had to get the timing right. So the timing is right now, despite COVID. We really feel like the timing's right. There is so much data in every community across the nation about the need for affordable housing. So we know we'll be able to fill 50 units. We have been operating 48 units since 2012. Approximately half of the residents who initially moved into that project are still living in that project. That's a huge sign of success. Our current permanent supportive housing would be considered to be the most service intensive. When we think about the housing continuum, which would be supportive housing in the community, in terms of just individual apartments leased out with or without subsidies, with case management support, our current units on our campus would be considered service intensive. We actually provide the meals for the residents. Case management is co-located in the building. There are other services on campus that they have access to. For example, we give some of the individuals their medication through our drug and alcohol program. So we were really excited to look at this as an extension of our current housing efforts. Besides it being service intensive, the current units we have are studios that lack functional kitchens. Many of our residents now have reached a level of independence where they want to cook, they provide their own meals, that we are no longer providing those. So we are looking at this as an opportunity for some of those individuals who've been in the service intensive permanent housing to step down into the tiny home village and to allow that unit to be used again by folks in the homeless community who need those service intense opportunities. So that was one of our motivating factors. I think the second is we know many people in Omaha are waiting for a housing referral, a housing voucher, a housing opportunity, however you want to look at it. Hundreds are waiting on a list. So to be part of the solution, we have to also be part of the development in housing. In the last 5 years, the Omaha community has seen an increase of individuals who are chronically homeless in shelter. That has gone from 12% about 5 years ago to about 25%. So we know those individuals who would benefit from these types of housing projects, who might have Social Security income as their only source, can't afford fair market, need case management due to their mental health needs or physical disabilities, assistance accessing transportation, things like that. We know that there are hundreds of people who would benefit from a project like this. So we are really excited to get it going. Some of the components of the project have not been figured out. This will be different than the projects that were presented at the beginning of the presentation in terms of we will be looking at rental subsidies for the folks who live here. We think that's one of the pathways for them to maybe achieve home ownership, if that's their goal in the future, a pathway to getting a Section 8 voucher that can be used in the community. So we will be looking at opportunities through housing authority vouchers and or HUD funding to support the rental assistance for this. The project will include a full-time case manager who will work with the individuals there. We very much follow a housing first approach at Santa Francis House. So case management goals are set by the individual and are not a requirement of participation, but we will work with people on their tenancy, on any goals that they have. Those are some of the main components, as kind of mentioned in the introduction. I have worked on 3 similar projects to this. And the other exciting thing about the tiny homes project is a lot of people want to live in a house. They want to have their own space. If you have serious mental illness, you may be activated by living in an apartment and having a lot of neighbors if you're experiencing hallucinations or paranoia. So we also feel like this is going to provide opportunities in our community that don't exist now. So for some of the more difficult to serve. We also know that folks in recovery sometimes who are graduating from our program have a problem finding housing units. So we're hoping that this is a solution for them. So some of the rental assistance pieces are yet to be worked out, but we do know we will be pairing rental subsidies with this project in some way. So as time goes on, we'll be talking more about that piece. I can't really think of anything else to say right now that Darin didn't say about the project. We love the gated community. I think Dan talked about that earlier. If rich people can have gated communities, so should homeless people. A couple of things about the design of the project that Darin maybe didn't mention is we also have some drop-off areas for our residents because we know our residents often rely on transportation assistance. Transportation that we provide at Siena, maybe Ubers, cabs, transportation through Medicaid. So some of those components have been incorporated into the project, so we're not disrupting the street or causing extra traffic for the neighbors. There's going to be huge improvements in the neighborhood that this project is going in. There's a park there where there's often a lot of encampments and homeless people who are staying during the day. There's going to be some improvements to the street and parking, as Darin kind of mentioned. So we're really looking forward to the benefits that this project is going to offer the homeless individuals we serve, the homeless individuals that live in the Omaha community, and the street improvements that are going to happen for the neighbors in this project through the partnership between the city and Arch Icon and Siena Francis House. So 2021 or early 2022 is our expected completion date, and we can't wait to start getting residents in the project.
Thank you so much, Linda and Darin. That is amazing. And I think we're going to open it up to questions. I actually have a question for Darin right away. Since I'm the moderator, I think I got to jump in first. I'm just curious as to the lot size, Darin. What is the actual lot size of that property?
The main lot that we have now is about 1.7 acres. So, and then we're acquiring we're getting another about 20,000 square feet in the city lot. So it's about 2 acres total. There's one house there that we're working around that hopefully we'll be able to get as well. And then we know some other developments are happening up to the north that will be housing. The issue here is it's traditionally been an industrial area. It's transitioning away from that. It's the north side of downtown Omaha, and there's a lot of infill development happening to the south, a lot of apartments around the baseball stadium, and a lot of the conference space, a lot of apartments going in. It's near Creighton. So this is where Siena Francis House has been since 1991, right, Linda?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's their home, and it's where it's happening. So we were fortunate to find a good space near the campus.
Very good. Very good.
We are excited about the proximity to our campus. One is the residents may utilize some services here occasionally, just the efficiencies that it comes from a maintenance, a case management services perspective. So we're excited that you will be able to walk from this project to our campus very easily, and that will offer us a lot of efficiencies.
Okay, well, we do have some questions that came in, some good ones. The first one is the lack of a national building code for tiny houses the biggest impediment to this version of affordable housing becoming routine or generally acceptable to local government officials? If so, what is the solution? Who should be providing the leadership? Trade organizations, state, federal government. Dan, I'm wondering, I know you've done a lot of work around that. Do you have comments on that?
So there's the International Code Council is what establishes building codes. The IRC, the International Residential Code, it's revised every 6 years, and every 3 years there's an adjustment. And basically, my understanding is, Darin may know more about this, that states basically start with that and then they modify it according to their state. Local communities may modify it further, but the IRC is kind of the building block. So that the tiny home advocates out there, and these were folks that just like the principal concept of tiny homes, not seeking to do it for affordable housing purposes, had been pushing for a long time for them to adopt some codes for homes underneath 400 square feet. I remember calling our building code people here in Eugene and saying, what's the smallest home I can build? And they said, well, you've got to have 120 square feet for your living room and so many square feet for your bedroom, you know, so somewhere between 500 and 600 feet. It was under the code impossible to build a tiny home that could be certified, approved for housing. Well, these advocates got the ICC to adopt what was then called Appendix Q, that established a separate code for homes under 400 square feet. And that was adopted into the code. It's an optional thing that communities have to opt into. So it's not given by right, was my understanding. That I don't know the latest on that, Jeff. Yeah, me too. So at any rate, when we went to our building code department, because this was in the process, was being adopted, and they knew it was going to be the next edition of the code. They said, as long as you build to that code in its entirety, you can't pick and choose which parts of the code you want to build to. So as long as you're willing to build to that new code, will allow you to build to this. So part of our learning about that was local code, building codes officials do have some latitude. And when you have particularly the political support behind you, that really helps, that then they can work with you to do those kinds of things. The fire marshal is another key person in this. You have to absolutely build to safety. We've been having ongoing battles around the issue of fire sprinkling, because our state building code official had a particular belief that there was an inherent smoke danger with sleeping lofts, which is part of Appendix Q, because you want to maximize your square footage, so you create a sleeping loft so that you have more living space down below. And he had the belief that that was a smoke danger, and therefore required us to put in sprinkling in the tiny homes that we are building in the Cottage Grove project by that code. So they do have approved sleeping lofts with an egress window, and other things under that code. So yes, it can be done. Talk to your local building code officials about how to do that. You're muted, John.
Thank you. Darin, do you have anything you want to add?
I would just add, yeah, when we started, we had we had 2 meetings, I think, in the summer of 2018 with the Omaha City Planning Department, and we got a letter in August with kind of their findings. These are all the things that we would need to do in order to make this work. There was no code for tiny homes at the time. They're in the process of adopting, or have adopted recently, the code that would allow for it. But they've always been very supportive of the project. From the beginning, though, it was going to take some waivers and some variances, and they didn't want it to set a precedent for other tiny home developments in Omaha without a better code being in place. So I think maybe this is kind of move that conversation along a little bit, and maybe something will come of it in other places in Omaha or Nebraska as well. But yeah, it's we've been very fortunate to have support from the city planning department, and it's Dan's right, it evolves over time. There are ways to find around the interpretation of the code. As long as the city's willing to support it, typically you can make it.
John, and let me just
And
add.
I think I want to add a couple things. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I was just going to say, you'll see a lot of tiny home development on wheels. And that's simply because if you put it on wheels, it's governed by your local Department of Motor Vehicles. And so there's different rules that apply.
Yeah, and I think the issues that we're talking about around city code apply further than that for implications for these projects or developments. One is housing authority voucher support, HUD support. I think we've even talked a little bit with you guys at NIFA about the requirements for new construction on tax credits because the tiny homes do not meet the NIFA criteria for new development. And, you know, I believe there's a waiver there, but I think there's greater implication for project development outside of city code requirements that probably need attention. I think the second thing is the original question was, what have we learned from other communities? One is we've seen several communities have these projects fail because they lacked kind of the dedicated land or the good site design. I think Dan talked in the beginning about how they acquired their land, how they did the site design. That seems to be a best practice. I think we've seen communities as close as Des Moines have some failures around this because there was not a good site design. We learned from the project in Kansas City that Darin mentioned that they were limited to 49 units in their plan because that was kind of a city code issue. They couldn't get to 50. So they kind of ended at 49. So there are some cities that are seeing some limitations to their regulations around this. And I think certainly the other financing pieces have got to, we've got to learn more about that, not just for this project, but just nationally to see these explode, because we know it's so much cheaper to develop these than an affordable unit, which is costing over $140,000 per unit.
Great points. You guys might have answered this, especially Darin and Linda, but someone had asked early in the presentation, is a local housing authority or a nonprofit organization the most likely vehicle that tiny houses would be introduced into a new community? If not, what is an equally or more likely candidate for tiny house? Locally introductory construction ownership. So I guess that's what entities would be good at doing something like that. And I think you guys have provided good examples.
Well, I do think there's another example in Omaha. I don't have the specifics on it, but there's some micro housing going in on kind of the south side of the old market in kind of the jail area. It's not the same as the tiny homes because I think it's part of an apartment complex, but there is some micro housing. I think that's more of a market rate being developed in Omaha right now.
And the other avenue is accessory dwelling units that a lot of communities are exploring because often they are, built on a smaller scale. But then it's typically an individual homeowner that wants to put an ADU, in their backyard kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, great. Let's see. How do the units sell or transfer title? That'd be a question for you, Dan.
So I want to clarify that our projects are also detached multifamily. So they're not individual lots. And the title is held by the nonprofit. The co-op has a ground lease with the nonprofit. So it's not, as Jeff talked about, they can't turn around and sell this at market rate. You want to add to that, Jeff?
Yeah, so in a housing cooperative, typically a person purchases a share in the co-op, and that's what grants them exclusive occupancy rights to one of the housing units that's controlled by the housing cooperative. And then when they, if they decide to leave, then they sell the share back to the cooperative, and the cooperative is obligated to repurchase it. And the appreciation on it in a limited equity cooperative, the appreciation on the share is determined by a formula that's typically, in the bylaws of the co-op and in the ground lease. In our situation, in the ground lease between between us and the co-op. There is also in addition to limited equity cooperatives, there's something called leasing cooperatives. And technically, currently, and this is due to some of the funding sources that we got that kind of required this, currently Emerald Village and our second project, Cottage Village, are leasing cooperatives in which the co-op doesn't own any physical assets. They just have like a master lease for the property. In the future, I think our goal is to deed over title to the building and improvements to the cooperative, but that's kind of how it works in a housing cooperative, in a limited equity housing cooperative.
Okay, thank you. And then this came in, Dan, when you were talking about vehicle parking, or does everyone use public transportation? But I guess that's something in the Omaha project as well. Do you see these folks having vehicles, or are they mostly using transportation? Public?
Yeah, so it's mixed. In our shelter program, we actually purchase bus passes for all the residents of that program because we can get a bulk rate from our local transit district that makes it very affordable. And obviously, you know, for them, it's a great benefit. In our permanent housing projects, because we're at 30% AMI, the presumption is that at least some of the residents will not own vehicles, and that is indeed the case. I don't know, Jeff, do you know how many we have?
At Opportunity Village?
No, at
Emerald Village. So we, you know, some of this is going to depend on the local requirements about, you know, how much parking a city is going to require that you have. There is a parking lot at Opportunity Village that's like 11 spaces, and you know, there's 22 units, and all of those spaces are currently filled, and then some of the members have to park on the street.
That is important siting consideration.
Yeah.
We always look for a site that is close to public transport.
And that's kind of, you know, I think if you're talking specifically about tiny houses, you know, it's probably better to do something more conventional multifamily in, you know, core areas, just because the density can be greater than it would be with tiny houses. But our projects are all on transit lines, so people are using like the municipal buses and stuff like that.
Okay. I do remember when we went to Veterans Community Project in Kansas City, they actually had an arrangement where they had a printer of bus passes at their community case management center. So they actually printed their own. They had an arrangement where they could make their own bus passes. So
assuming with approval from the
yes, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
There's also, and this is kind of like a more recent development with co-op housing in like Canada, but sometimes co-ops will have a contract with like a car sharing entity, not something like Uber. You know, those companies typically don't have those relationships, but there are some other co-op car sharing issues, which, you know, that's something to also think about.
Yeah. Okay. Before I move on, Darin or Linda, do you want to say anything about? I know that's a bus line in Omaha, about transportation, or Linda, you have obviously people that have vehicles.
I think there's a couple things that we would want to add. One is because the area around us is growing with residential housing, it's market rate and above. They've added some bus lines to the direct east of us in the last couple of weeks, so that's super exciting. We know with the density of development in this area, there may be more to come. So the bus transportation around us has been good, and it's only getting better. I think the second thing is we are intentional about putting our parking outside of the gates of our community. One is we know often cars and visitors bring problems in these types of projects. So our parking is actually located outside the secured gate to get in the community. That A, limits the number of visitors that someone could be having, and then B, just helps with the site plan or site design, and Darin can talk more about that. Certainly right now, probably 50% of our folks who live in our project, in our apartments here, have a car. So I know city waiver has given some waivers on the normal parking standard for these types of projects. So I don't know if there's anything that you want to add there, Darin.
Yeah, it's kind of worked out well with our development. 16th Street is industrial, 17th Street was dead-ended, so there was no connection on the south side of the site. There's a park that runs through there that Linda talked about, providing some sort of hiding spots for some of the homeless that create some problems in the neighborhood. Well, the city had already had plans to do utility work on both 16th and 17th Street. They were going to, 17th Street was an industrial grade street. With this project, it became residential, so they were able to save on some of the costs going into their improvements on 17th Street. In the process with this, the timing worked out well. It made sense to then connect 16th and 17th Street. So as part of that, now we're building off-street parking right off of the connection to right in front of where the community building will be. So it will be outside the gated community. Tenants will live there if they have vehicles that they have a place to park. There's also an opportunity for on-street parking on 17th Street, which is a wider street. So we have space for parking, not any more than we would really want, to attract any more than we really need. And then emergency access is another thing, to make sure that we have the ability for emergency vehicles to get to inside the gates when needed.
Okay, thank you. So this one actually is, how can banks or organizations like NIFA be encouraged to finance the construction and repurchase of tiny homes, group meetings, community and other guarantees, ownership requirements? So it's like, how do you build this capacity, the interest? And obviously, NIFA went on that tour with you guys to Kansas City. I know Tim came to Eugene, Oregon, and I know you have an application in our crane cycle. So I know Rhonda's been doing a lot of work here in Lincoln. She's trying to kind of gather some momentum. So I don't know, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Dan mentioned that Emerald Village was basically entirely donor financed, and that's kind of miraculous. It's not really something that you can scale up doing it that way for a variety of reasons. And with shared equity housing and with co-ops, that conventional financing can be a challenge, just because the securities market, is really geared to either multifamily or conventional single-family home mortgages. So there is recently a vehicle where mortgages for community land trust homes, like single-family homes on community land trusts, those are increasingly being accepted into the securities market, and that's meaning that lenders are more willing to make permanent loans for that. There are a couple FHA programs that are compatible with community land trust co-op projects, but other than that, it's kind of about educating lenders about the model and so that they understand it. And then, particularly like smaller local banks, they will provide permanent loans for co-op projects that they just retain on their own portfolio. And then there are other kind of more mission-driven lenders that only work with co-ops, like whether it's a housing cooperative or an agricultural cooperative and stuff. And so that's another area that we've explored. But the financing is, that's really a big part of the piece of the puzzle is figuring that out. And the securities market being the way that it is currently, it's I think it's a matter of lender education.
Great.
So John, maybe this is a better question for you or some folks in Lincoln, but a project that maybe would be a model for that is the container project that's happening in Lincoln. From what I understand, it is fair market. It's not large scale. I don't know, we have at least 2 there, but I've been following some of the information about that. So the container project had to have some financing. They said they were kind of over their budget, so that they would be maybe someone to consult with about how to get, more mainstream kind of banks on board.
Yeah, and that's been in the paper recently. You could easily search the container home project in Lincoln on 27th and Vine. Those pictures look really, really cool. Okay.
They do.
Do you agree that tiny houses would be an excellent solution for infill housing on very narrow, 40 to 50 wide vacant lots that conventional housing with their 2-stall garages can't easily fit on? Rural towns and villages would really benefit.
Yeah.
So one of
I
the
think
things that we looked at, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, Oregon recently, is kind of in the middle of eliminating like single family only zoning. And, we're currently working on another project that is, specifically is what we're trying to do is infill development on a single family home lot for 6 units. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a good infill strategy, particularly as zoning codes get changed to allow for more density.
Darin can join in on this with me, because we went on a little field trip one day and we looked at places in Omaha, maybe where this type of housing was developed as a response to post-wartime housing or poverty housing. And there's 3 or 4 places in Omaha where there are very narrow lots, houses that are close together, shared kind of courtyards. It looks a little different now because driveways have been put in, maybe some small scale garages, but we know that in the history of Omaha, there's been some similar developments for this type of close kind of clustered housing, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, this is not new. It's a little bit different, and the tiny homes are maybe smaller square footage than what were built historically. But there are some pockets in South Omaha and other places that a lot of people don't know about, where you can barely get in and out of alleys to get to houses that have been there for decades. Small row type homes, you take a row home and you split it into 2, and you've got a duplex and they're not very big, and you got a second floor. You got the old railroad houses where it's just a kitchen, a bedroom, a living room, and a dining room with a small bathroom on. And that's it. So this isn't new. I think it's a revisiting of what makes sense from an efficiency standpoint, from a cost standpoint, given the cost of construction per square foot anywhere in the United States is out of control, and it's not really going to get any better in our opinion. So it makes sense from a lot of directions, especially for the homeless. We weighed, does this make sense for a Section 42 project? Yes, in some ways, from a cost standpoint, it does. You get more bang for the buck, and it is a model that, okay, let's maybe layer it. Maybe you can do both Section 42 and some philanthropic. So all the burden is not shared by one or the other. So that's kind of the way we've approached it. It's just something that needs to be done. It's just how to make it happen. That gets back to the question: how do you make this happen in communities? And it's really just wanting to do it, and where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, great. There was a clarification about the container homes, Linda. I guess they are market rate. They're not affordable, but they're hoping that they can work the kinks out around that, and then the next ones developed will be less costly to build. But still, everybody should check out that article. Okay, we got still got some questions here, and I know we're getting close, but if you guys don't mind, we'll just kind of keep plowing through them. Is that all right?
Go for it.
Okay. Here's a question. Have you done any that target families with children? I think, Dan, you said.
Yeah, so in our in our Cottage Grove project, the 4 homes that we have yet to build are slightly larger, with the intent that the sleeping loft. There's a downstairs bedroom and a sleeping loft, and we think the sleeping loft would be ideal for 1 or 2 children. But of course, you can't discriminate in housing, so it just depends on who applies and who has an interest in it. In the project Peace Village, we're actually designing a 2-bedroom home that will be over 400 square feet, so technically doesn't meet the definition of a tiny home, but still pretty small. So again, with the intent to include at least small families.
Yeah, I think obviously, a multi-person household, if you're talking about, most folks experiencing homelessness in our area are 1-person households. So, it can make a lot of sense. But, when you have children and multiple people in the household, obviously, like that size limitation is an issue. We are kind of branching out into larger home designs and townhouses and stuff. And that's just because our affordability strategy, this village model of combining a co-op and a land trust, that's independent of the physical design of the housing.
Okay, Darin, you might have mentioned this, but the person asked when that Omaha code was updated.
I think just earlier this year. I can confirm.
Okay. Let's see. Regarding Siena Francis next steps housing, do you agree that manufacturing the housing in modular units off-site and moving the completed housing to the site and installing them on individual foundations makes good sense? If so, why or why not?
Well, I think.
Go ahead, Linda.
Okay. I was just saying, I think that's a great question for Darin versus Siena Francis House. I will say, over to the writer of that question, all options. Dan has presented a model here, which there's been some volunteers who have put together the home. The Kansas City project, which has also had a lot of national attention, which is called the Veterans Community Project. Theirs were all built on site, on slab by volunteers, which created a very economic project for them. So I think right now we're these, but with the outcome of high sustainability in the project, because all nonprofits who are in this work know that having to fix, correct, keeping the maintenance budget down is important to the sustainability. So we really want to create a good quality project that's economically efficient.
Yeah, and I'll just echo that. These will be slab on grade. It's just whether or not the finished product is of higher quality, built, framed on site, or if we can partner with Metro and create a template, or any community college, or there are component structural component builders out there. It may be a combination of those things. It's just what gives us the best, most energy efficient, most long lasting finished product.
We also want to create something that fits into the neighborhood.
Sure.
I think the project from Oregon is a great example, that it looks kind of individualized. It doesn't look like a cookie cutter kind of project. It looks very attractive. So we also want to create a project that the neighbors in the neighborhood are going to like and want in their community.
Yeah, I'm pretty jealous of some of those that Dan showed. They've got some pretty stellar exterior looks, but some really high-end finishes inside looks. So, good job.
Let's see. Has there been any thought about connecting 2 to 3 of the tiny houses together in a creative way so that furnaces, air conditioning, water softeners, water heaters can serve more than one housing unit, thereby making them more cost effective? Connecting them together might also aesthetically look more like traditional housing, making them more welcomed.
So one of our designs at Emerald Village, the architect actually designed it as half of a duplex. And a local profit for post-prisoner release took that design and created a small village of 5 duplexes using that exact same design. And so I think that works very well. And I'm no doubt there are other creative kinds of things you can do along that line.
Okay. In the Lincoln market, we need to work with our city council to get some development like this to occur in our city. So that's just somebody saying we need this in Lincoln. And like I said, there is some kind of momentum building right now. I don't know, Rhonda, if you want to jump in and say anything.
Yeah, so we have met with the city council, and there's a lot of interest on board, and we've got a developer on board for funding purposes and everything. So I think we do have a lot of headway. It's mainly searching for the property site, and then we will be working with the zoning and everything. But when we met the pre-council meeting, you know, they were very interested, and I know our mayor, I believe, is from Oregon and is very familiar with the tiny home villages, so I think that helps as well. But yeah, somebody said earlier, where there's a will, there's a way. You know, we're gonna definitely try and make this happen, and we're also partnering with the Department of Corrections. They have the facility to actually build the prefabricated homes. And so ours is going to focus definitely on those that have been incarcerated for the majority of the housing units, but you know, we'll open it up to general homeless population if necessary. But with the population we work with, those incarcerated, the Department of Corrections is going to be a key partner in building those homes.
Okay, great. Thanks. Someone said, can I be a part of the project? I just said to send me an email so I can connect you, Rhonda. Here's a great question about peer support. You know, working with people with lived experiences, they're wondering, Dan and Linda, do you plan to have a level of peer support involved with your projects? Do you currently have peer support involved?
It's important to keep in mind, and you know, I think we try to make this clear when we give presentations and stuff like that, that you know, our co-op projects, like, that's not supportive housing. You know, we provide training and support kind of initially for the members of the co-op, but that's really around you know, that can involve like mediation skills and stuff like that, but it's really geared toward getting them understanding how to conduct business as a cooperative, budgeting and plan, you know, financial planning for the management of the property. I personally don't think that that co-op housing is necessarily like a good fit for the kinds of populations that are targeted by permanent supportive housing. And yeah, so in our co-op projects, you know, I mean, we do outreach to local service providers and stuff like that, but and take referrals from service providers. But at least from our end, what we do, it's different from permanent supportive housing.
I think, Dan and Jeff, what you guys already have. So what we're referring to is peer support. So someone who has been there and done that, helping another person who's going through it. You guys have that built in.
Yeah, right.
Anyways, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, because no, I mean, it's democratically managed and yeah, so it's kind of baked in.
It's almost organic. So for instance, at Emerald Village, one of the things that quickly happened were those who had vehicles give transportation to those who don't. I mean, talk about peer support, it's right there. And so there's a lot of that. I mean, it wasn't that we, you know, worked to make it happen. It just organically happens. And there might be more that could be done to provide some more peer, you know, specific training towards that end.
Yeah, great. Linda?
Are we out of time, John, or did you want me to answer that?
You know, if you guys don't mind, there's 2 more questions.
Okay, then I'll just give a really brief answer to that. When I was at the VA, we did incorporate peer support in the HUD-BASH programs. We were one of the first sites nationally to do that. We saw a huge amount of value in that. It can feel a lot different going to an appointment with a peer support than a case manager. The other things that they can do just in terms of moving into housing for homeless individuals is often lonely and isolating. So having someone who can come out and play Xbox, one of my peer supports used to say, I'm the only person who can get paid for playing Xbox, and helping someone kind of set up the kitchen. So we know that there's a ton of value in it. In this project, we really haven't incorporated much peer support into it at this point. Some of the services decisions have not been made, like the tenancy plan. So that is a consideration we will make. We also know, just like Oregon project, many of the residents will pair up with one another, share car rides, go to the grocery store together. So there is that organic peer support, but we probably will see more of a formal peer support role in our project, even if it's through volunteer efforts going forward.
Yeah, great. And I know Omaha Community Alliance is doing peer support with the shelters, correct? And yeah.
Yes.
Okay. What is the tenant selection process? Like with the pocket structure of 4 to 5 homes, I guess maybe that's referring to Darin, how you said there'd be kind of the nodes of 4 or 5 homes. Is there any intention of placing specific individuals that work well together? That might be down the road, but.
Yeah, that's to be developed, but I'll defer to Linda on that, and yeah, she knows her population.
Well, one is we do think several of our residents from our current project will move into this, and they already, may have developed a relationship, may want to be neighborly. So there is probably some opportunity for that in the beginning. There may be a couple of pods that are just dedicated to the people who've graduated from substance abuse treatment to try to offer one another support. However, once the project gets filled and you start dealing with turnover, you have less of an opportunity for those things. So the real opportunity is at the initial lease up.
Okay. Wow. Well, we did it. That was a lot of great questions. You guys really stimulated some good discussion. Again, thank you so much. Any last words?
Just thank you.
Just excited to be part of this, and thrilled to be involved. And I'm just looking forward to see that Omaha project develop and what emerges from that.
We need to make a trip out there too, Dan.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
And we'd love to.
Well, thank you all.
I didn't plug our website, but squareonevillages.org. It's a great place. There's a ton of information on that website. All the projects are the toolbox. If you click on the tab for the toolbox, has a lot of resources. It does ask for a donation to get into the internal proprietary stuff. That's one of the ways we support ourselves. But I really encourage people to take advantage of the resources that are there.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you again, everybody. Really appreciate you being part of this today. Have a great day.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.